My name is Lori Dickerson. My husband and I, Bill, and I live up the road a bit in Tupelo, Mississippi. We'll celebrate our 32nd wedding anniversary this summer. We have 3 children, all successfully launched from the nest, and a 3-year-old grandson. I am a registered nurse, presently working on the med-surg floor at a small hospital near my home. None of what I have just told you would have been possible if not for the outstanding care I received and continue to receive from the teams of professionals at Region 3 Mental Health Center, the North Mississippi State Hospital, and the Batesville Crisis Center. In the 12 years since my diagnosis was originally made, I have experienced life as a patient at all 3 facilities. When my insurance was exhausted and private hospitalization was no longer an option, I thank God, literally thank God, that Region 3, North Mississippi State Hospital, and the Batesville Center were all there to help me. These medical professionals have been caring, concerned, knowledgeable, and skilled, and their team effort has allowed me to take back my life from the grips of severe clinical depression and overwhelming anxiety. The mere fact that I can stand here today and talk to you like this is attributed to that. I've been able to return to my career that I love so much and successfully function in the very demanding and challenging role as a medical surgical nurse working at the bedside. It attests to the caliber and treatment given from our local state-funded mental health care programs. My dark days were the result of severe clinical depression, a diagnosis bestowed on me after numerous inpatient admissions to several different behavioral health centers. My darkest day was the day I was placed in handcuffs, put in a patrol car, taken before a judge, and committed to the state hospital. I can still remember the hurt and anger I felt at hearing my husband talk about all of my shortcomings, the result of crippling depression. And I can remember removing my wedding bands and hurling them at him when he tried to hug me just before I was taken away. I now realize that he was at a total loss and didn't know what else to do. It felt as if my whole world had just crumbled beneath my feet. Pride can be a real stumbling block, especially when it causes me to believe that somehow the phrase, "there but by the grace of God go I," doesn't apply to me. After all, I'm nothing like those people. There was one particular patient who reminded me of Grizzly Adams, huge, with a bushy hair and an unkempt beard and a gruff voice. I was terrified of him. One day in a patient education class on medications, he asked why they couldn't seem to find the right combination of drugs to treat his symptom. And I saw a tear quietly trickle down his cheek. He was ill and in pain and asking the same questions and wondering the same thoughts as me. That was the moment I accepted the fact that I was one of these precious souls surrounding me, and that this was exactly where I needed to be to get the help I so desperately needed. Actually, being committed to the state hospital was one of the biggest blessings that's ever happened to me. Did I really just say that? I meant it. I had well-meaning folks say to me, well, if I'm praying hard enough and believing strongly enough and had enough faith in God, that I wouldn't need psychiatry, that God should be my therapist. I accept that God is truly a wonderful counselor, but I also believe that in his infinite wisdom, he understands that sometimes illness requires a human touch. and that He has provided the medical professionals and treatments necessary for my healing and recovery. The brain is an organ, just like any other organ in the body, capable of illness. Like most medications, the antidepressants that have been prescribed for me can become ineffective over a period of time. When that happens, my symptoms will gradually return and worsen. Often, it takes a stressful event in my life to trigger the symptoms enough that I can recognize the relapse. When my medication is working as it should, I am unable to fathom the idea of suicide. But when the acute illness returns, I find myself surrounded by a darkness so black and painful that all I can think about is just making the pain stop. I lose sight of all the wonderful blessings in my life that I have to live for. The chemicals in my brain are so out of kilter that I am unable to think clearly and reason objectively. The pain becomes all-encompassing to the point that death truly seems to be the only relief, the only choice. I used to see recurrence of my illness as a sign of failure and weakness. Now I realize I am no more weak than a person suffering from the flu or any other politically correct illness. The staff at the state hospital taught me that, and it has become the cornerstone of my recovery. Rather than dread, I now have a deep sense of gratitude that there is indeed a place where I can go and achieve wellness. For a long time after I was discharged from the hospital, I found myself breaking out in a cold sweat whenever a patrol car passed by me. I would begin to shake, and often I had to pull over and take a few minutes and a few deep breaths before the anxiety would pass. Being shackled in handcuffs and put in the back of that cruiser was not an experience I ever dreamed could happen to me. And believe it or not, it could have been so much worse. I was blessed to be treated with respect by the officers sent to keep me safe. And again, I thank God that a bed was available and I didn't have to go to jail. Governor Barber, legislators, hear me. I did nothing to justify being put in jail, surrounded by prisoners who chose to break the law and cared for by jailers with no clue of how to treat me. Being put in those handcuffs was an incredibly frightening experience, and I cannot imagine how I would have coped with waiting in a jail cell for a bed in an already overwhelmed and crowded prison, watched over by guards with a very limited understanding of my illness, and being treated as if I had committed a crime. It is as absurd as the thought of sending someone in the throes of a heart attack to the jail to be treated because the emergency room happens to be very busy that day. Can you imagine your loved one being sent to jail simply because they are ill? Neither could my husband. Do you say to yourself, oh, but that would never happen to me? In several of the hospitals where I found myself a patient, the meeting always ended with this prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. That prayer has become my framework for coping with this illness, and today it has become my goal. I am a living, breathing example of what mental health care in North Mississippi can do, indeed in the state.